Parents of Reddit, what is most fucked up secret you are hiding from your children? That she can't have a relationship with her grandfather because he's a pedophile and I would never trust him. The rest of my family maintains a relationship with him and leans on me hard to open up communication because family comes first. They are absolutely right. My family does come first. Which is why my daughter won't ever have to have a relationship with him. Edit. He has molested multiple members of my family and I only found out when I was pregnant with my daughter. Without going into too much detail, he also has a mental illness and I've been told that I need to let him have a relationship with my daughter because he's sick and couldn't help it. Adoptive parent of 3 kids, 2 of which are biological siblings and cousins. Found out a year after the adoption that the biological parents were half-siblings who shared the same dad. The bio parents found out after they had the first child and proceeded to have another. The kids are now 16 and 13 respectively and have zero clue that they are a product of incest. Unfortunately, their biological grandpa just passed away, so there very well could be a big reveal coming in the near future. That I've been changing every clock in the house on New Year's Eve to 3 hours early. At 9 p.m. we celebrate the new year, then hang out for an hour. He thinks he's breaking every rule and has a great time. Now that he's turning 11, this will never happen again. With phones and being somewhat smarter. My daughter was conceived at work, on airport property, in the back of a Ford Focus. While we were waiting for a medflight to land, she knows nothing about this but tells me she wants to be a pilot when she grows up. My father found out when he was in his 40s that his father was not his biological father. His mother, my grandmother, literally cheated on her husband with the milkman. I was the kid in the scenario. When I was like 12, my dad died of leukemia. He was never around much so I didn't see him often. But that was never the secret. I actually remember the day he took off and left us. Woke up one morning and there was a pile of new toys on the living room floor with a note for Mom. Anyway, he started coming around when he received the prognosis. We developed something resembling a positive relationship before he died. When he passed, it absolutely destroyed me. I still remember the funeral. I had to be dragged kicking and screaming out of the car because I didn't want to see it. In his will he left me his car, a Camaro, that I was supposed to get when I turned 16. His parents fought tooth and nail to keep it from me. They were really people. His entire side of the family was. And we eventually just told them to off and keep the damn thing. Fast forward about 15 years. I find out the guy that died was not actually my dad, he was my brother's dad. My real, biological dad has been living in the next town over 20 minutes from my house. My entire life. My entire family knew about it. Except for me. It was why my grandparents fought to keep the car. They knew I was not his son. I still don't know if he knew or not. But I assume so. My maternal grandmother has met him several times in my life. My mom said she never thought it was anything worth digging up. Said she intended for me to never find out. I've still never spoken to him. I know a name and an approximation of where he lives, as of about 10 years ago. Beyond that, I know jack about the guy. Grandma said if I ever want to meet him, she would help me contact him. Dunno if I ever will. I'm the child of a parent that hid something horrible until I was 27. One day when my parents has a domestic dispute, my dad called me just to get back at my mom. He said, "Do you want to know something about your whore mother? She slept with over 30 guys during our first 2 years of marriage." I just sat down and started stuttering. He said, "You know how people have always said you look different than the rest of the kids?" I said, "Yeah, that's because I'm not your dad. Your mom slept with my best friend and you were conceived. Another thing, your brother, the one just younger than me, I'm the oldest, belongs to my brother." My mom just bawled in the background without denying it. I just laughed. And then I went into 2 years of therapy. My mom kept it a secret that the woman I was named after, her mom, my grandma, was stabbed to death by my uncle when my mom was 18. I always suspected my grandma had a tragic death because of how my mom would avoid talking about it. But I didn't know it was that tragic. I don't know if it's the most up, But my kids don't know that my grandfather was a child molester. He died before they were born, so I don't see any reason to ever bring it up. Also, that before we got together and got married, my husband was briefly married to my sister. No kids. And no real drama when it ended and we started dating later. So it's not really a thing that gets brought up often. They do know that she's had multiple husbands, but they don't know who the first one was. I'm hiding a lot of things. I used to be a stripper for 10 years. Growing up in an abusive house, I partied hard and used to be part of NYC and Montreal club scene. That I was kidnapped and taken to another country. There's a lot of things. Now I'm just a boring accountant mom to everyone. No one has any clue what I've been through. Crazy what your kids don't know about you. Honestly, drop the bomb if you see them heading down the same path. They'll their pants and it'll get the point across. My son was a product of rape. He just thinks I had really low standards in men at one point. That we weren't actually visiting daddy at his work. It's a secure psychiatric ward where he's been since she was 3 months old. My son's older half-sister molested him and that's why we don't see them anymore. Waiting until we can get into a psych for support before we break it to him. Edit. He was 3 when it happened, so was able to tell us, quite graphically, what was happening. The sister also admitted it and said she did it because it was funny and she liked to hurt him. DCP, Child Protective Services, became involved and investigated both families but couldn't find anything suspicious. We are telling him because we very strongly believe it is the right thing to do. We don't know how much he remembers and would much prefer to give him the coping skills now instead of possibly letting him disintegrate into a non-functioning adult with massive problems. A colleague of mine has a friend who hid from her 8-year-old daughter that she, the 8-year-old, would die within a few years because of a terminal illness she got. My father molested my daughter. She suppressed the hell out of it. We are still trying to figure out how to break this to her. We cut off all contact with them. But my mother feels that this is something that shouldn't affect their relationship if my daughter doesn't actually remember the incident. I don't agree at all. But that doesn't stop my mother from trying to contact us. She comes from an age when women just suffered and said nothing about it, and so feels that we should just accept my father's apology and move on. It's overall a very confusing situation that my husband and I, have trouble understanding how to handle. My son is still very young, but I'm not planning to tell him his dad left us for meth and another woman, hes clean now, and they actually split. He's at least involved again. It was a secret until recently my mom told me, when she and my dad got divorced. Things were very, very messy, and my dad would do things to dodge paying for my care. He ended up owing my mom a couple $1,000s, and my mom was ready to sue, but instead of getting the lawyers involved, and because she knew my dad was not a healthy person to be in my life, she offered him a deal: keep the money, but relinquish custody officially. I'd still get to see him if and when I wanted, but he would give up all legal rights as a guardian, because he hated paying my mom that much. He took $2,000 over me. Not a life-changing, earth-shattering secret. It's just revealing to know my dad values money more than me. Before anybody casts judgment on my mom, my dad was, and probably is, a piece of human garbage who abused me and allowed me to be abused a few years after this. So I'm 1000% fine with my mom's decision. She's my favorite person in the world, and every single day I am so lucky to have her in my life. After reading a bunch of these, I feel pretty good that my most up secret is that I eat most of their Halloween, Easter, parade candy when they are at school. That we don't go to bed the same time as they do. My wife and I each have a child from a previous marriage. Both of our ex-spouses were abusive cheaters. Both children still adore and idolize their other parent, and we just keep smiling and nodding. This probably isn't the type of thing Op was asking, but it is a secret that we will maintain for years. I'm the child, 48 now, but my father told me my mother was dead all throughout my childhood, and everyone in the family, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, stepmother, supported the lie. Not because my mother was on drugs or abusive, or a criminal, or even a bad person, just because they had a huge argument one night and she went to stay with a friend, without me, so he decided she would never be allowed to be in my life again, ever. He wrote her off. On my 18th birthday, she called our house and asked to speak with me. So, I found out the truth. My parents told me my sister is adopted. They didn't tell her. She's 34. By the way, help, what do I do? Buy the whole family DNA test kits for Christmas and watch the world burn. Savage. But actually intrigued on how that will go. Not a parent but a child. This last Christmas I found out that not only was my mom had already been previously married and divorced, but my dad had a kid before he married my mom. So I have a half-brother or sister that I have never met. The real kicker was I found it out from my new sister-in-law, who had someone do some digging. Found out, assumed that I must already know, and brought it up out of the blue on Christmas Eve while we were baking cookies.